The hum of Fortitude Station echoed through the corridors, a constant reminder that it was the last bastion of humanity against the Zarth Empire. Captain Ava Storm stood before a viewport, her gaze fixed on the stars beyond, where the immense darkness of space pressed in like a suffocating weight. She could feel the tension in the air, the calm before the storm. The Zarth were coming. Her hands rested on the cold glass, fingers barely touching. The station had been under siege for days, and despite the courage of her fellow soldiers, the odds were stacked against them. Fortitude Station was humanity's first line of defense in this part of the galaxy, a symbol of human resilience. But right now, it felt more like a trap. Ava's mind raced through calculations, coordinates, strategies, probabilities. She had always been good under pressure, but even her expertise couldn't shield her from the reality of what was happening. Destruction's Call, the Zarth flagship, was on its way, and with it came a fleet that could annihilate everything they held dear. "Ava, you in here?" The voice of Lieutenant Harris cut through the silence, and Ava turned to see him standing in the doorway. His face was etched with worry, but there was an edge of determination to his expression. "I'm here," she replied, her voice steady. "Just thinking." Harris nodded, stepping closer. He was tall, built like a mountain, with the kind of calm demeanor that made him a rock in moments like this. They had been through hell together, and she trusted him more than anyone. "They're almost in range," he said, glancing at the tactical display on the wall. "The Zarth fleet is about to breach our perimeter." Ava pushed away from the viewport, her eyes narrowing. "We can't let them get that far. Not after what happened on Mars." She didn't need to say more. Harris knew exactly what she was referring to, the destruction of her home colony, the loss of her family. She had joined the United Earth Defense Force after that, driven by a single goal, revenge. But as the years had gone by, the mission had grown bigger than just personal vengeance. It was about protecting the people who couldn't defend themselves. It was about proving that humanity would not be conquered. "Have you briefed the pilots?" Harris asked, his voice low. "Not yet," Ava replied. "I wanted to go over the plans myself first. I'm not sure what we're walking into with this battle. We're outnumbered and outgunned." Harris ran a hand through his hair. "We've been through worse, Ava. If anyone can pull off a miracle, it's you." Ava offered him a tight smile, but the words didn't quite reassure her. She was good, damn good, but even she knew that no amount of skill could change the math. They had only one shot at this. "Get the team together," Ava said, her voice firm. "We launch in 15 minutes. I want everyone on high alert. No mistakes." Harris saluted and turned to leave. "Understood, Captain." As he walked away, Ava's thoughts turned inward. The upcoming battle felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. The Zarth had a fleet that could reduce entire colonies to rubble. They were relentless, calculating, and utterly ruthless. She had seen it before, heard the screams of the dying, felt the loss of an entire world. But there was something else. She could feel it in her gut, something about this mission was different. The Zarth thought they were invincible, but they underestimated one thing. The human spirit. The fire that burned inside every man and woman who had ever been through hell and fought their way back. Ava squared her shoulders and walked to the briefing room. The room was dimly lit, its holographic screens flickering with data and live feeds from various sectors of Fortitude Station. The rest of the squad was already gathered, their faces a mix of determination and dread. Each one of them had their own story, their own reason for fighting. But right now, they were united by one thing: survival. Ava stood at the front, her eyes sweeping across the room. "All right, listen up," she said, her voice cutting through the murmur of conversations. "We've got one shot at this. The Zarth are coming. They've got the Destruction's Call, and they're bringing a fleet with them. We can't let them take this station. This is it, folks. The last stand." Ava paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Every eye in the room was on her, waiting for orders. She could see the fear in their eyes, but there was something else there too: resolve. "We're outnumbered," she continued. "We're outgunned. But we've got something they don't, each other. We know this station. We know the terrain. And most importantly, we know how to fight. So, here's the plan. She gestured to the tactical display. A hologram of Fortitude Station spun in the center of the room. The Zarth fleet was already in range. We'll launch at dawn, Ava said, her finger pointing to the incoming enemy ships. Our objective is to disable the destruction's call. We know their weak points, engines, shields, and the secondary weapon system. We'll hit them hard and fast, using guerrilla tactics. No heroics, no second chances. She looked at each of her pilots. If we don't take them down here, they'll destroy everything. We've trained for this moment. We know what we're capable of. And we're not going down without a fight. The room was silent for a beat. Then, one by one, the pilots nodded, their faces set in grim determination. Ava's heart beat in her chest, but it was steady now. They were ready. She could feel it. Let's get to our fighters. As they filed out, she lingered for a moment, looking at the map of Fortitude Station and the approaching fleet. She could hear Harris's voice in her mind, reminding her that they had been through worse. But she knew this time was different. This time, the stakes were higher. The future of humanity rested on their shoulders. Ava slipped into her fighter's cockpit, the cool metal surrounding her like a second skin. The pre-flight check ran automatically, but her mind was elsewhere, running through the plan again and again. She could already feel the thrum of adrenaline building in her veins. All pilots, report in, came the voice of her squadron leader over the comms. We launch in 5. Storm here, Ava said, her voice clear and steady. Ready to fly. Good luck, Captain, Harris said. We're with you. Ava took a deep breath, settling into her seat. The time for preparation was over. The storm was coming. The battle had begun. Ava's fighter shuddered as it rocketed through the void of space, the engine thrumming beneath her. The stars streaked by, smudged in the cockpit's view as she maneuvered her ship into formation with the rest of her squadron. Through the comms, the voices of her fellow pilots crackled in, their voices a mixture of determination and the adrenaline-fueled edge that came with knowing the fight was imminent. Storm, you ready? Harris's voice cut through the static, a steady anchor in the storm of chaos. Always, she replied, her hands tightening around the controls. She could feel the weight of the mission settling in her chest. Every pilot in her squadron had a role to play. Their lives depended on her strategy. And that strategy, despite everything she had planned, was now teetering on the edge of uncertainty. In the distance, destruction's call loomed, massive and impenetrable. The Zarth warship's silhouette was a dark presence against the stars. It had arrived ahead of the rest of the fleet, an ominous sign of what was to come. Ava's pulse quickened as her eyes locked on the data streaming across her console, highlighting every flicker of the enemy ship's movements. We'll hit them where it hurts, Ava muttered, more to herself than to the crew. Her squadron leader's words echoed in her mind, if we don't take them down here, this station, and everything we've built, will be dust. Focus, Harris's voice brought her back. We're close. The first volley of enemy fire lit up the dark sky, and Ava didn't hesitate. Her fighter lurched into a sharp roll, narrowly evading the barrage that would have torn her apart. All units, evasive maneuvers, she commanded, her voice cutting through the comms. The rest of the squadron followed her lead, diving and twisting as laser blasts filled the space around them like a storm. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her hands moved instinctively, guiding her through the chaos with the precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Storm, incoming! Harris warned, just as a series of Zarth fighters came into view, their glowing red engines marking them as an imminent threat. I see them, she replied, gritting her teeth. On my tail. Ava's stomach clenched as the fighters closed in. The Zarth were ruthless. They didn't hesitate, didn't flinch. She had to be faster, smarter. She couldn't afford mistakes. With a surge of power, she punched the throttle, sending her fighter darting forward, narrowly avoiding a direct hit. The Zarth pilots followed her, determined to end this quickly. Ava smirked. They had no idea who they were dealing with. She executed a sudden barrel roll, diving into the midst of the enemy squadron, drawing them into a tight formation. She fired off a series of rapid shots, taking out 2 fighters in quick succession. The explosion of the Zarth ships lit up the darkness like a firestorm. "Nice shot, Captain," Harris called out, his voice tinged with respect. "Keep it up, Harris." "We've only just started," Ava responded, her eyes scanning the battlefield. The sounds of explosions and gunfire filled the comms as her squadron pressed on. They were outnumbered, but they had the advantage of strategy. The Zarth may have been bigger, more technologically advanced, but humanity had the one thing the Zarth couldn't replicate: adaptability. Ava's eyes flicked to the tactical map. Their primary target was in sight, the Destruction's Call. She had to reach it. But the Zarth were smart, and their defense had been coordinated. Every approach was met with heavy resistance, and their fighters were relentless. "We need to break through," Ava said, her voice tight with concentration. "We can't let them regroup." "I'm with you, Captain," Harris answered. "Let's move in." Ava gritted her teeth as they darted closer to the warship. Destruction's Call wasn't just a ship, it was a fortress. Its shields were nearly impenetrable, its weapons nearly impossible to evade. But Ava had one chance to do this. They had to hit the weak point in the engine bay before the reinforcements arrived. "We're coming up on their flank," she said. "Ready your shots. This is the only window we've got." Her squadron began their approach, each pilot adjusting their angle of attack. The Destruction's Call loomed closer, its enormity overwhelming in the dark expanse of space. Ava's hands moved faster, her mind calculating the trajectory of their approach. She could see the vulnerability, just behind the shield array, a small gap that, if hit just right, would cripple the warship's engine system. "Target locked," she muttered, her thumb hovering over the trigger. "On my mark." But before she could give the order, the Destruction's Call fired back, its main guns opening up in a devastating barrage. A blast of searing energy struck one of the ships in her squadron, sending it spiraling into the void. The pilot didn't even have time to eject. "One down," Harris said, his voice grim. "Let's not waste their sacrifice." The remaining pilots rallied, pushing forward. The air around Ava felt thicker as the tension mounted. She could feel the heat of the fire as her ship streaked closer to the warship, her heart pounding in her chest like a drumbeat. "Mark," she yelled, her fingers slamming down on the trigger. Her ship surged forward, the weapons array firing in perfect unison. A series of explosive blasts rang out, striking the weak point just as she had calculated. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, an explosion erupted from the Destruction's Call's engines, a shockwave that rippled through the space surrounding them. "Direct hit!" Harris shouted. "We've done it!" But their victory was short-lived. As the massive ship rocked, the Zarth launched a retaliatory strike. A fleet of reinforcements surged from the dark depths of space, more than Ava and her squadron could handle. Ava's gut twisted with the realization. They had succeeded in disabling the Destruction's Call, but at what cost? The tide of battle was turning, and humanity was still on the losing side. "Fall back," she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Regroup at Fortitude Station, now." Her squadron peeled off, evading the incoming enemy fire as they made a desperate retreat. The war was far from over, but this small victory had given them a fighting chance. Ava's fighter jolted as she dodged yet another blast, her heart racing. She could feel the exhaustion creeping in, but she had no time to rest. Not yet. The real fight was just beginning. The stars stretched out before her like a sea of diamonds, cold and unforgiving. Ava's hands gripped the controls, her fingers moving with precision as she guided her damaged fighter through the void. Her body was aching, her mind sharp with exhaustion, but the adrenaline kept her going. Her squadron was scattered, battered by the Zarth retaliation. The Destruction's Call had been crippled, but its death throes had unleashed a fury of reinforcements. Ava's comms crackled with static, Harris's voice barely audible through the interference. "Storm, regroup, station, we can't hold." Ava's heart skipped. Fortitude Station. She could already see its distant silhouette, surrounded by the flashing lights of enemy ships. It was under siege. The Zarth were closing in, and humanity's last line of defense was slipping from their grasp. "Hold on, Harris," she muttered under her breath. "I'm coming." Her fighter shot through space, dodging debris and enemy fire. The station was ahead, and she could see the flashing red warning lights along its hull. The outer defenses had already been breached. Every second was a second too late. She opened a direct line to the station's command center. "Ava Storm to Fortitude Station, I'm inbound, prepare for reinforcements." The voice on the other end was strained, urgent. "We're barely holding on, Captain. The Zarth are everywhere. They've launched a full assault. You need to hurry." Ava's jaw tightened. There is no time for hesitation. We fight, or we lose it all. The station's outer rings loomed larger as she approached. The frantic sound of gunfire and explosions filled the comms, muffled and distant. The Zarth had launched their final offensive, and Fortitude Station was holding by a thread. "Ava, you're almost there," Harris's voice came through again, slightly clearer now. "We're..." The transmission cut off, replaced by a crackling burst of static. "Ava, do you copy?" His voice was gone, swallowed by the chaos. Ava's heart clenched. She had lost too many already. Too many friends. Too many lives. She wasn't going to let this station fall. Not on her watch. Not after everything they had fought for. Her comms buzzed again, this time with the unmistakable voice of Lieutenant Harris, now a little more urgent. "Captain, we're at the breach point. We need a diversion. If you can pull one off, we might have a chance." "Understood," Ava responded, voice cool and steady. "We'll give them hell." The plan was simple in theory, but Ava knew better than anyone that simplicity was often the hardest to execute. She pulled her fighter into a steep dive, aiming for the enemy's forward position. The Zarth ships were clustered around Fortitude Station, and their heavy artillery was focused on the station's defenses. Ava's squadron needed a window, a chance to get close enough to launch a decisive strike. But as she descended through the maze of wreckage and gunfire, she saw the Zarth flagship, a new, imposing ship, larger than Destruction's Call, emerge from the shadows. It was a monstrous thing, towering above everything else, its hull bristling with weaponry. The enemy had brought reinforcements, and this new warship had only one purpose, to wipe them out. Ava gritted her teeth. The war was far from over. She had one shot, one opportunity to make a real difference. She opened fire without hesitation, unleashing a volley of missiles. The enemy ship was massive, but its hull wasn't invulnerable. Her weapons found their mark, striking the warship's forward shields, causing sparks and flares to erupt across the surface. It was only a small dent, but it was enough to catch the attention of the Zarth pilots, who quickly turned their fire in her direction. "We've got their attention," Ava said, her voice steely with focus. "Everyone, hit their weak points now." The squadron broke formation, each fighter weaving between incoming fire. They were no longer working in perfect synchronicity, they were fighting for survival. Every shot, every dodge was a life-or-death decision. Ava dove again, narrowly avoiding a series of heavy laser blasts. Her heart raced, but her instincts remained sharp. The Zarth flagship's defenses were formidable, but Ava had studied every angle, every possible weakness. She targeted the same spot on the warship's hull. Another series of missiles tore through the air, striking true. This time, she saw a noticeable shift, a crack in the warship's shield. "Come on," Ava muttered, sweat beading on her forehead. She wasn't the only one attacking, but she was the one drawing the fire, distracting the Zarth long enough for her squadron to take their shot. The flagship's weapons began to recharge, but Ava wasn't done yet. With a sudden jolt, she pushed her fighter into a power dive, using the debris around her for cover. She'd getting close, too close for them to aim at her. She needed to be under their radar, invisible to their targeting systems. Her squadron followed, keeping close formation as they dove in behind her, taking advantage of her diversion. "Ava, it's working." Harris's voice crackled over the comms. "We've got a clear shot at their engine core. If we hit it now, we'll cripple them for good." Ava's eyes flicked to the tactical readout. The warship's engine core was in range. But so was its outer perimeter, thick layers of armor designed to repel even the strongest missiles. They had no time to waste. Ava didn't wait for another confirmation. She lined up her shot, her fingers tense over the triggers. Her heart thundered in her chest, but she pushed all fear aside. She fired. The missiles streaked through the air, slamming into the exposed core with a deafening explosion. The ship's massive hull rippled with the impact, and then, in the blink of an eye, the warship's engines flared, sparking and sputtering as the force of the explosion destabilized its core. A second later, the flagship's entire side detonated in a brilliant flash of light, sending shockwaves rippling through space. "Direct hit," Harris whispered in awe. But the victory was short-lived. The remaining Zarth ships rallied, their fury undeterred by the loss of their flagship. More fighters swarmed in, their guns trained on the retreating human pilots. "Fall back. Regroup at the station." Ava barked, her voice unwavering. She was already heading back to Fortitude Station, her fighter bleeding fuel and systems. As she neared the station, her stomach twisted. She saw the damage firsthand. Parts of the outer ring had been torn apart, and fires blazed across the surface. The station was on the brink of collapse. But they had bought it time. Ava could feel the weight of every decision, every sacrifice. Fortitude Station still stood, barely. The fight wasn't over yet, but they had just proven something that the Zarth couldn't deny. Humanity wasn't going down without a fight. As she landed, her fighter shaking with the effort, she knew this was just the beginning. They'd survived the first wave, but the war was far from over. "We're not done yet," Ava said, her voice resolute. And in the depths of space, the battle raged on.